Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Well, still good morning, I think. No, good afternoon. That was Gravity, winner of 7 Oscars. So yes, well done. Congratulations. I'm Jason Solomons. Absolute pleasure to be here at this summit to find out more. I'm a film critic, really. So when all the talk of conversion in the digital sphere, really, the critics seem to be the ones that need the most conversion into the realms of 3D. And if any film has done it in recent years, I'm sure it's Gravity, whose stereo supervisor, Chris Parks, joins me now. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks, Jason.
And congratulations on Gravity, just the 7 Oscars. Were you in LA? Did you go up? Were you?
No, I wasn't. I'm working on a couple of Warner's films at the moment, and there isn't an Oscar for 3D yet. So.
Right. Now, if there were one, would it come under cinematography? Would it come under VFX with Tim Weber, who was up there on the stage? Where did you fit into? Which realm are you?
I think it's difficult with 3D. 3D covers such a wide range of the film. You know, it covers, it's involved in the planning, it's involved and has influence on the shooting, the on-set stuff, obviously very much on a film like this, the VFX as well, into post-production, the edit, you know, the 3D covers it all. But I tend to think of it as a standalone thing. I'm a head of a department on a film specifically for the 3D, so it sort of sits separately. But I also think 3D's at quite it's a young medium in comparison to the history of film, and I think it needs perhaps a little bit more evolution before and more content out there perhaps.
It took them a while to introduce like an animated category when Pixar became so obviously part of the major conversation. Then they did introduce an animated category. You would want to see a 3D category one day if there was enough good work being done?
I think it does rely on enough good work being done and enough consistency of work. And I think it does need its own category. I don't think it fits comfortably into any one category. But then you've got blurring of the categories anyway with cinematography on a film like this. And I mean, Chivo very rightly got the Oscar for cinematography. But it's a very different discipline to your typical lighting cameraman. It's a lot of sitting with animation artists and placing lights and looking at the effect of lights in the digital world, a lot of working out of the animation. So it's already you've got blurring of the disciplines there between cinematography and VFX. So yeah. I don't know how it would come. I'll leave that to others to decide.
Yes, well, we'll leave it to the Academy or BAFTA executive. Eventually, maybe we'll get there, and we heard it here first. We can start a movement. But what Chris has kindly got, we've got some clips of Gravity, and Chris is going to talk us through some of the processes involved in creating this masterwork of 3D, if I may say. And we'll look at how you worked with the different departments and with the actors as well. I mean, the clip we saw there, which gets me every time, still very exciting. Can you see it objectively and how it's all put together eventually, having worked on the sort of shot-by-shot kind of mosaic of it?
I tend to struggle with films and that I've worked on, and I do tend to see them as they came together. You see shots like that in so many iterations. The first time you're seeing it, Sandra's grey and blocky and very, very basic lighting on her, and that builds up over time. And previous to that, you're seeing it as an animatic. You're seeing it on storyboards before that. So it tends to be quite difficult to separate yourself from that and see the film. Having said that, I think the VFX, particularly on this film, is so sensationally what Framestore and Tim Weber did on this is so stunning and so convincing that I really don't see the joins in the VFX. The 3D, a bit more so. There are things I would have done differently if I was to do it again.
Every head of department sitting there going,
I think you do. I think that's the nature of filmmaking. When you spend so much time wrapped up in anything, there's always things you change.
How long were you involved on Gravity?
About 3.5 years from start to finish. So that started with initial tests. We were looking at going native rigs and how that could be used. Then some of the requirements of the blocking and the moves it was realised that we needed to look at post-conversion for some of it and combining that with a stereo rendering at Framestore.
Much of the story when on the journey of this film and its journey to the Oscars with Alfonso Cuarón saying how he needed to invent new ways, new technologies, if you wish, which you've just sort of highlighted there. What was it like the day when you realised we can't do what we want to do and we're going to need another year? And then someone says to Alfonso, we need another year. Then he has to go to Warner Brothers and say, have you got another year? You can have some more money.
I mean, it was actually less of a struggle than it can be on films. I think the studio was very much behind this. It's a low budget film for a studio feature. It was quite a small movie in many ways, and that's part of what's so amazing about what came out of it. Mm-hmm. But
is this because you were all concentrated in just two actors basically and one set?
I think it was partly that, but partly Alfonso initially conceived of it as this simple story. It was going to be this quick project that he could get away before the next one, just focus on the story and something simple. Space was purely there for the environment and the jeopardy, but it could have been set anywhere. And this film's all about Sandra and the journey that she's going through. So it was conceived as a very simple project, and he thought, okay, we can shoot it quite simply. It's two characters, it's easy, we'll get it away quickly. And 4 years later, it was still underway. And it was some very simple, some very straightforward things that sort of took big chunks of time. We'd actually completed all the work. We were in post-production. We were in the DI, so we were grading it. I was just starting on the depth grade. And Alfonso saw the opening shot. It was one of the last times he was going to see it before signing it off. And for whatever reason, the shot was projected, rotated 180 degrees, so it was upside down. And Alfonso was, stop, love this. Can we do it? Can we have this shot this way up? Okay, we can start it that way up, but it's a 12-minute shot. And we come in on one of the characters who has to be the right way up part way. So, okay, well, we'll just have a simple rotate part way through to bring it means it's all got to be re-rendered. So, and the computing power on this was so ridiculous. Tim Webber tells the story of how to render this film on one computer, they would have had to start it in 5000 BC to get it completed in time. And because of the amount of computing power, that took another 3 months to get that one shot rendered. Everybody had wrapped, we'd had the wrap party, everything was done, apart from the one shot, but it's a 12-minute shot.
12-minute shot. I mean, this is the thing with Gravity, is that you mentioned Sandra Bullock's story and journey. It's one of the films that really is an intimate little story told on the massive, grandest scale with grand technologies. And also, it has what are Alfonso's signature shots that he's been doing since film like Y Tu Mamá También, which was just a simple road movie in a car. But he's become known for these kind of quite long takes. Yeah. And so you were trying to do that in the 3D sphere. Is that where this is the sort of revolution of this film? Because I'm not sure, but in most 3D films, it seems that they tend to be blockbusters as well. Yeah. There's quite a lot of fast cutting, a lot of shots. Yeah. This one is.
You've hit absolutely on one of the key things that made this film different and helped me to do different things with the 3D. Long shots. The opening shot's 12 minutes. We've got lots of 3-minute shots and 6-minute shots. There's an 11-minute shot in the middle. And they're not, they don't distract you, they involve you more in the film, but it also allows me, in charge of the 3D, to control the 3D through a single shot. Every time you have a cut, it takes you a couple of seconds to get back into the 3D and for your brain to re-register the depth. In quick cuts, you lose a lot of the depth. In long shots, you can appreciate the 3D, appreciate the depth, and you can moderate the depth over it. So a good example is the interior scene where Sandra's is the dream sequence, and then she's trying to work out how she's going to get the craft back to Earth. And we took the 3D on a big journey through that to try and mirror the emotional roller coaster she was going through. And Prime Focus are doing a session on Gravity tomorrow, I think, and they'll be talking more about the technical side of that.
Right. Well, you've got quite a lot of technical. We can go we can go on to Sandra, I think, because we have a clip of Sandra in the Sandra helmet thing, which is that right?
Let's have. I think let's have a look first at if the projection guys can play.
Has everyone seen Gravity in this room, by the way? Good, because you can't be. You haven't seen it in 3D.
I'm so disappointed in
Put those glasses on, sir. Put those glasses on and see a little bit.
Okay, if we were going to play a 3D clip, we'll play Gravity trailer F3 first. So this is a 3D clip.
This is a bit with Sandra Bullock, who's an actress.
I think that leads nicely on to one of the things that we looked at with the 3D, and it's something I've talked to you about, which is the native stuff we did. So if the projection guys can start playing the sum head is the shot, the one that you just brought up a second ago. One of the things that I was particularly keen we achieved with, despite the fact that we were using post-conversion, was, and there is a lot of intimacy in this film. You're focused on Sandra a long time. You're drifting around her in the shot that we just looked at. We're going right in and into one of her eyes. And actually, human faces, we know human faces so well that it's quite difficult to recreate all that depth.
But we also know stars' faces quite well.
Yes,
it's not,
exactly.
I mean, in a way, we know Sandra Bullock's face. It's better than some of our friends.
That's it, and which also raises another interesting thing, which is we have a perception of partly of what the depth is on their face, and we know the camera lies. We know the camera gives a different sense of somebody's face. We know that as you change the focal length of your lens, faces look different. So there's a perception that people have of what Sandra is going to look like. So what we were having to do, we can play that shot, that sequence now, the sum head one, and in the sequence that you'll see here, we shot a series of native headshots at different focal lengths. It wasn't of Sandra, obviously, it was of a model who came in, so that we could then communicate with the post-conversion vendor, Prime Focus, and with Framestore on the bits that they converted, and direct them as to what we wanted people's heads to look like.
Mm-hmm. And it didn't matter that I mean, I do know Sandra Bullock a bit, but she doesn't look anything like her.
It's actually some of the grosser things, the large things. How far back the ears sit.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't until you guys will be able to see this on these. The ears actually sit well back on the face, and the initial shots that we saw coming back, and I've seen this with multiple vendors, tend to have the ears sitting too far forward. We don't appreciate that. Quite how sloped cheekbones are, quite how separated the chin is from the neck, and it's some of these details that you don't necessarily notice it or understand what's feeling wrong when it is wrong, but when you get it right, it just feels right.
And is this something that you had discussed with Alfonso? Is this something he had brought up that in previous 3D hadn't been right, or is this something that you, in your experience of stereo, had seen and wanted to always put right, but never had the time or never had the technology?
It was more the latter. I'm a big believer with 3D, and particularly with conversion, that it can look fine, but there can be things in there that will grab at your consciousness. You can't put your finger on what it is that's not feeling right, but if it just snatches at you subconsciously, it's drawing you out of the story. And with something like this, we needed to be better than that, and that's what we looked to do on the interior conversion shots, particularly.
And the shot that we saw with Sandra inside the helmet, she wasn't wearing a helmet in usual.
She wasn't wearing a helmet in anything. So, as you guys probably know, most of the film, all the exterior stuff, her suit is all CG. The vast majority of what you're seeing is CG. The face isn't, but in order to get the visor reflecting the right things, Tim and Alfonso spent vast amounts of time on getting those reflections right. And of course, it's all shot in a studio, so you don't want reflections of the studio in the visor. And this all had to be put in, and then there was the breath on the inside.
Yeah, the breath is
the breath is so key to this film, and her breathlessness and her running out of air and being able to breathe again.
And there was a big debate, does condensation happen in space? Would it steam up?
Of course it does.
Yes, it does now. It's true. So did you work with Sandra that she has a breath here? Did you record the sound first of her breathing and then sync the effect to the breath?
To be honest, I wasn't involved in that side of it, so I can't answer that. I think that was done in the mix. So there was obviously the action of her breathing, and you were seeing her movement, and that created the impetus for the breath, and then the mix gave the sync of that.
But you did work. She did turn up, Sandra Bullock. She exists.
Yeah.
You working with her as an actor. Were the skills demanded of her in this? Well, obviously there were physical demands as well, but the actual skill of acting, because actors do so much, especially on close-ups with their eyes and the slightest movement. Working in stereo for her, I don't know if she'd worked on that before. Did that demand different things for her? Did you discuss the actual kind of mechanics of the performance with her?
I mean, because it was being shot in 2D, the sort of feeling of the shoot from that point of view was very similar to what she's used to. Obviously, the studio, the fact that it was only her face that was being used and there wasn't anything for her to interact with a lot of the time, and it was all mocked up. Actually, we can show, if you want to play Some First, which is gives you a bit of an idea of the work that went into it, how some of these things were shot. So it was a very alien stage. What I wanted to do, though, was use. I'm a big believer in 3D being very potent for helping actors to communicate to audiences. We know that 3D conveys a lot more information than in 2D. We know that a lot of communication is non-verbal, and I really wanted
information
to use that.
emotionally, information expression-wise?
Yes, emotionally. And it was that I felt 3D could really be used to do a lot. It gives you a bit of an idea how some of these sequences were created, and all that was taken from here was, well, that's the shot that we just looked at. For me, when I read the script, actually the sequences that were particularly exciting were the interior scenes, where it was all contained, it was close up on Sandra, it was an opportunity to use 3D to convey that emotion or help her to convey that emotion.
And is this something that, I mean, I think that when I talked about critics needing conversion earlier on, I think that was one of the things that this film, and I think Life of Pi previously, the year before, had taken huge steps in aligning story to emotion to effects. So the three came together here, and they became part of the narrative, as you say. Is this something that you're finding the further you go into 3D, that you're being able to kind of bring out? It's not just an effect to get people to put glasses on.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Once we finish this shot, I'll bring up something else which gives you an idea of what we did on one of the shots. I think it raises an interesting sort of challenge with 3D, particularly at the stage where we are with 3D, where I think there's a lot that you can do with it to help the audience perceive more of what the audience or the actors were trying to get across. But that's got to be done in a subconscious way the majority of the time. As soon as they notice the 3D or are aware of the tricks that you're playing, you've failed. Mm-hmm. At the same time, you have to do things so that audiences feel, oh, that was worth me putting my dark glasses on and paying an extra few dollars. And so you have to have fun with it. So it's trying to balance those two. And we try to do both on here. Alfonso definitely wanted to have fun with it, and there are all those shots of things flying out of the screen at you, which I think do that. We try to involve the audience.
But I mean, personally, in Gravity, it works because they do that in space.
I think anything of that sort has to be in context. It's got to be done in a way that feels genuine. I think out of screen things are only moments, are only gimmicks if the only reason for them coming out of the screen or the only reason for that camera angle was because you want to have fun with the 3D.
So George and Sandra, they're together. We saw them together. This is them. This is what they're wearing. None of that CG. That's actually what they're wearing. Or?
But none of that was used. Right. So on the helmet, those spiky bits are motion sensors, motion trackers. The suit was so that they had a suit to feel around them, but that was all replaced. Again, the fire extinguisher was a prop so that she was holding something, and then that was replaced.
Mm-hmm. But that's that's the wires that she talked about so much. Yeah.
Exactly.
Was that the ballet sequence, the sequence where she's resting and does the full circle?
No, this is where she's in the fire. She's trying to put out the fire. She's thrown herself back, got unconscious, blood out of the nose.
So she's read the script, or you're talking her, Alfonso and you are talking her through the choreography of that at that point.
Alfonso, on a headset. So he was talking her through all what he was wanting from it, and it was interesting. I think it was quite by the sounds of it, quite a daunting exercise for her, and she had to. It was quite physically demanding as well. Wire work is demanding and tricky. Let's play
the next clip was
this next clip, which one was it? It's the Some Grab 2, if we can play that.
How long, in boring temporal terms, did a sequence like that take to knit together, or is it done in so many different bits that you like for someone doing the background and that you can't even put a name on it?
I mean, the sequence of events really was. I looked at the animatic first, so we had a pretty good idea of how this shot was going to develop. I then gave notes for the guys at Framestore who were doing the CG for their second camera as to exactly what we wanted. They went away, recreated that. We sat down, watched it. Alfonso would watch it. Actually, probably not at that stage. At that stage, it would still be very blocky, basic 3D. We'd tweak it, we'd work it up, get it to one. This was happening over a period of probably 6 months from that. It would take 2 or 3 weeks until we saw the next version, guys at Framestore working away behind computers. And then we'd slowly see the levels of detail, the lighting, the textures applied, which changes the sense of the 3D. Then when we had something finished, we would sit down with Alfonso and hope he liked it.
The classic is for an actor to, maybe they don't watch the dailies, some do watch dailies and some don't watch them. But in something like this, what clue would Sandra have that she was doing it right or wrong, and how would she be able to change her performance?
Well, by this point, she's done a performance, and everybody else is having to work around that. So, and that's particularly Tim Webber and Alfonso. So Alfonso, if he's got the performance that he wants, and Tim, the VFX supervisor, knows that he can create everything else, the suit, and there isn't going to be anything that's going to cause problems. He's got all the tracking in and all the details and everything from the equipment. That will then be handed over, and it'll have to work. In rare occasions, you can get actors back, but and there was some sequence additions where that happened. But in terms of the shots, that's all baked in pretty much when you shoot, and you've got to do what you can with the performance.
What would be the key to this, Chris? Would it be, from your point of view, from Tim's point of view, and the Framestore guys and Alfonso's, would it be having, it seems impossible to me, but to have it all planned, that you've got your actor's performance and you know where it's going and you know where you want it to go, and then you're adding all these layers and things to it. Where's the room for the spontaneity, organic kind of growth?
I mean, there's no doubt about it. Gravity was much more planned than most films. It's still, because so much of the performance is down, and I think so much of the success of the film is down to Sandra's performance. And we were talking about all that extra information that 3D gives you in the face. So much of this film is communicated by Sandra's face. And while the animatics were all done, and we knew the positions, we knew where those arms were going to be, the actions that she was going to try and do, what we didn't know was the performance she was going to give emotionally through her face. And that, I think, is where the spontaneity came, and what is absolutely critical. It doesn't matter how good everything else looks and works and feels, if she's not on form, which she was, you don't have a film.
But the logistics of doing it and planning, the Even just the storyboarding, even just the the daily shot list, the call times for such a project as this seems immense. Someone's got to be completely aware of where it's going.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, the wizard on this was Tim Webber with the VFX, and so much relied on everything had to be tied together. So he accommodated what we needed with the 3D. So if there were things that we were trying to achieve that would be made better by certain framing or blocking or whatever, he would ensure that was taken into account. And I gave him specifications for some of the things to help that. But in terms of bringing all these disparate elements together, particularly the acting with how that shot was going to materialize, that was the wizard that is Tim Webber.
Mm-hmm. You've worked with special effects for many years. How different was this? I mean, you did Tree of Life, Terrence Malick, which is not that long ago.
No.
Palme d'Or winning. Did you only work with Dr. Trumbull,
yes.
presumably, on those?
Well, he did. We were involved in some of the sort of abstract life before the birth of the universe, life before birth sequences, and actually he and us were working away separately and creating sort of different fields.
But those were two. Is there a 3D version of that?
No, that was all 2D. So my background's in specialist film and in traditional films. So that's why when I come to 3D, I don't. For me, it can't be all about the effect. It's got to be about telling the story.
Which is magnificent in this. Have you? I'm going to open up the floor to you guys in a minute to ask Chris anything that you like. But my final question to you is going to be: so the magnificent achievement as Gravity is, game-changing as it's been hailed, are its techniques, are its possibilities available to a wider range of filmmakers now as a result of it, or is it still the sort of specialization of a big studio?
There are two sides to that. One is a film set in space that looks real and is stunning like that. And I think that the VFX behind it and the a larger studio film rather than smaller independent film was what really made that work. The other side of it is, or the other side to that question is, from a 3D point of view, do you need that and those budget and that effects and that planning to create 3D that works successfully? And without any hesitation, I'd say no. There are things that were done in this film could have been cut quickly, it could have been shot with long lenses, and achieved told the same story. It wasn't the money and the VFX that made this effective in 3D, it was the long takes, the ability for the 3D to do its work and have it say, the use of wider angle lenses, which can apply to any film. It's moving, because I have this conversation a lot with directors and cinematographers, and it was a conversation I had with Alfonso actually about, he and I sitting there in the DI, me talking about 3D films and what makes a 3D film, trying to persuade him to do a native 3D film next, and me saying that the issue is that cinematographers need to, and directors want to cut quickly because to tell the stories that they want, that audiences demand nowadays. And he just said, rubbish. That's not cinematography. Cinematography is telling a story through pictures. It's different to TV, and you want to let the audience linger on shots. And it's going back to cinematography of the 70s and before, the longer takes, the wider framing, which you can do with any film, and they can be, as this has shown, they can be absolutely gripping without constantly being cut quickly, and that's what will help to make 3D films effective.
Ooh, I'm excited already. See Badlands in 3D. Ladies and gentlemen, yes, I'm going to stop hogging Chris now. Sorry, he's a bit fascinating, so I kept talking to him. So we'll start with this gentleman down here.
What was the ratio of the native 3D to the post-converted stuff that was done on the film?
So in terms of the split, nothing was shot with 3D cameras. The exterior scenes were all native, i.e. stereo rendered. The interior scenes for Yeah, all of the interior scenes where you're seeing Sandra out of her suit basically were post-converted, so her body is converted. In some of those, the environment is stereo rendered. So again, native, we're creating two cameras in a virtual world.
Right, and you say you kind of looked into doing parts of it natively. Was there anything that really spurred the decision to do it all, kind of so much of it in post?
It was a couple of things. One was for the exterior scenes, it was all, or the vast majority, 95% of each shot was CG, so that was all going to have to be stereo rendered anyway, and it gave us more flexibility to work and treat the 3D in the way that we wanted if we did stereo render and we converted the face. But the conversion of the face was reprojected onto a model within the 3D world. On the interior scenes, there just wasn't the space to get 3D rigs. If you've seen the film, you're in these escape capsules, which are very restrictive. They were too tight for the single body Alexa as it was, and panels were having to be moved. It was impossible to do that without it being visible on shot because we were on such wide angle lenses. So it was that balance between what we would have gained from the native compared to what we would have lost in terms of being able to tell the story was too much to sacrifice. I would have loved to have done it natively, and production and Alfonso would have loved to have done it natively. We weren't going to be able to tell the story. The one shot where I think we should have done it natively is the final shot of the film, where she's splashed down and she's climbing to shore, and it's worth seeing that shot. I won't talk any more about it. That one though could have benefited.
Before the pterodactyl sweeps down.
Yeah, but the decision there was made to shoot on 65mm film anyway to get for different reasons, and so again, post-conversion made more sense.
There was a gentleman over there, then we'll come to you, sir. Gentleman in the check shirt. All right, well, you could go, but don't worry, we'll get back to you. He's following on.
He's on that particular shot. I was wondering, why did you decide to leave that splash coming into the camera? In a way, come in and spoil it if you want.
Yeah, I think you've got a very valid point there, and I think not to ruin the end of the film, the splash does make you aware that suddenly you're there and there's a camera there and you've got a camera team behind you and it's not Sandra alone in the world. And there was a very long, convoluted story that got us to that point, and it was discussed. But by the time I think Alfonso was more convinced by losing it, we were already committed to going that route. As Jason said, the time scale of individual shots is so lengthy that sometimes by the time you get to the decision, the obvious decision, you've committed yourself to going another way.
But isn't it always seems to be that you could argue, I don't know if anyone bothered arguing, that it's kind of like the Wizard of Oz moment when it goes back to black and white. You've been in this other one, sort of a bit more earthbound.
I like that. I'll use that next time.
So it's like, back in Kansas.
Yeah.
All in a second later. A gentleman in the check shirt.
Hey.
Whereabouts do you see yourself going from here? This has been hailed as a game changer. Where's it going?
I think you've got to look at Gravity in the context of the development of 3D, and I think we have to, in 5 or 10 years' time, be looking back at Gravity and going, okay, that was a certain milestone, but we have to be doing better than that. That can't stay as sort of the pinnacle, if you like. And if you look back, you've got Avatar and you've got Life of Pi, Hugo. Some of these other films, things like Pina, give you sort of equal milestones at previous times. So I think it is just one in the development of 3D, and I think it's if you talk to a lot of people working in 3D, the things they want to be doing, and this includes people working on sort of studio features such as this and that we're working on at the moment, the films that people want to use 3D on properly are the narrative dramas. It's people, it gets back to what we're talking about with communicating, using 3D to help actors to communicate. That's where 3D, I think, has much more power actually, and can be much more effective than the big VFX films most of the time. And that's where I think the future.
You said
is.
you couldn't go to the Oscars because you weren't probably going to win as a category, but you were working on 2 films for Warner's at the moment. Can you tell us what they are?
I can tell you what one of them is, which is Edge of Tomorrow, which is the Doug Liman, Tom Cruise film. I mean, I'm not expecting that, or that isn't the next step. But what we are trying to do there, it's a Doug Liman film. It's quick cut. There's a lot of camera movement, a lot of action. I mean, it's a great film, a really, really good film. But the 3D, what we've tried to use the 3D in there is to more traditional things, add to the intimacy and add to the fun in the moments of danger. So it's a different approach. It's not, that hasn't been shot specifically with 3D in mind. In that case, 2D was probably, arguably, the primary product from it. 3D was considered all the way along, and I was on set, but it was sort of the second string, I guess.
No, and that's for this summer, isn't it?
That's for this summer, June the 6th.
June the 6th is the next work from Chris Parks, but until then we shall content ourselves with his fabulous work on Gravity and his brilliant contribution to the 3D Creative Summit today. So thank you very much, Chris Parks.